Ruler School is brought to you by Happy Little Hug Factory and these amazing patrons. Extra special thank you to guest lecturer patrons Brody Harris and Lance Albertson. Thank you for your support. Enjoy the video. Hey there everybody, GMO73 here, welcoming you back once again after another long week of Force of Will to the Ruler School Teachers Lounge, the podcast featuring myself and, as always, Ryan Miles.
Scooby-Doo.
Brandan Bremont.
Daphne? Question mark?
Frank Klosser unfortunately can't be with us this week, but he is replaced by Patron Anthony Lewis. How are you doing, my friend?
I'm doing good, y'all.
Why don't you go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself real quick before we get started?
So I got into the game when the Knights came out, and that's how my friend taught me, and then I played Reflect, Refrain, Fairies for a while. Then too many other things came up, so I had to quit, and so I'm getting back into the game, trying to start a community over here, and so far it's off to a good start. Slow, but it's good.
Well, we're glad to hear it, and we're glad to have you be a part of it. And again, thank you for support on the Patreon. If you want a chance to be a part of the Teachers Lounge, go ahead and check out the Ruler School Patreon. There's a link down below and at the end of the video to take you to that. Lots of cool perks, with one of them, of course, being to be able to join us here on the podcast. So, before we get into our topics for today, as always, we have to give the imaginary crown for last week's poll, as decided by you, the community. Last week's question was, what ruler would you ascend, and kind of a little bit how? And unfortunately, for the rest of us, Ryan gets to continue to wear the imaginary crown as he is the champion.
I didn't look at it this time either.
Yeah, I was like waiting for the foot to drop. I'm like, it's definitely not Blazer. There's no one.
He is the Blazer Gil Roberts.
That's crazy.
Was voted as the one that people wanted to see. So,
win.
with a close second of Dark Alice and tied for Primogenitor. So, Primogenitor and Dark Alice tied for second. Wow. But congratulations, Ryan. You get to wear the crown for another week.
I thought for sure that Dark Alice's waifu power was going to dumpster everything else. I did not.
I was trusting in the waifu
this. Thank you,
power.
community. Thank you for making the good choice.
Well, so with that out of the way, though, enjoy the crown while you can still have it. Maybe we'll see if we can knock you off of it next week. So first up, we right after the podcast, we recorded the podcast last week. We got a bunch more information on runes, and then later that week, we also got the second article on runes, kind of talking a little bit more about how they work. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly kind of go over that topic, what exactly the kind of new divinity mechanic to go along with runes is, how that functions, and then we'll kind of give our thoughts based on kind of what we were thinking runes were going to be. So the new rulers, this is exclusive to Valhalla rulers, are going to have an ability called Divinity. This Divinity will have a number attached to it. The starter deck rulers apparently are going to have Divinity 10, although I imagine maybe that changes. Just based on this article, they're all going to start with Divinity 10, and that is kind of a new resource. So you will have this rune deck of up to 5 cards. Those runes can be multiple copies of the same rune. It can be any combination of 5 cards that have the subtype rune on them. Now, in addition to their their will cost, they will have a divinity cost as well. So when you flip up a rune, you'll kind of spend divinity points based on the effect. Now, what we've heard is that divinities kind of are going to range between 1 all the way up through like 6, potentially more. And you can cast as many runes as you want per turn, depending on if you have enough divinity and the will cost to cast them, obviously. So then, as you cast these runes, they get flipped face up, they stay face up, there's no way to flip them face down that we know of up at this point, and then they count towards your divinity total. So once you hit that 10 divinity, you're done. You can't use the runes from your rune deck anymore. And then essentially, it's not like you can keep casting the same rune over and over again if it's flipped face up. You could cast the same rune multiple times if you had multiple of the same rune in the rune deck, but that is kind of where the play around and flexibility comes from, is you kind of get to decide what's in there and how you want to use your rune deck based on the cost of those different runes, the divinity cost. So that's all we know up to this point. It's very interesting to kind of see how that kind of works. But what are your guys' thoughts?
Yeah.
Ryan, why don't you go first for us?
Sure, yeah. I'm really intrigued by it. I mean, I do always love seeing new mechanics, especially when they have already given us a kind of insight as to what they're going to be doing competitively with this kind of stuff, where we are going to see the balance coming around it. I like that it feels, again, like they're breaching out into the the Fox, the Scheherazade, like Grimoire mechanic, where you're doing stuff from things that are not in your main 40 deck, which gives you an extra bit of decision making when it comes to deck building. And I like that they're like putting a hard limit on it with the Divinity, because you did see like the last 2 times they try and do this get a little bit out of control. So I'm pretty excited for it. It's really going to come down to like once we start seeing the cards, like what type of abilities they put on here. Like, are they going to be super impactful, or are they going to be like kind of useless, that kind of thing. But again, it is like almost like with Scheherazade, the fear of starting with a 10-card hand. Fortunately, like the Divinity limiter, you won't just have access to like super power, like your most powerful cards at all times, but like it does still feel like you're just starting the game with extra resources. So I'm interested to see what the cards actually do, to see how that plays out, if it's like super strong or just like very balanceable, you know.
Sure. Brandon?
So, well, I do think this is very exciting and very cool, and I'm very excited to see the rune cards that we get. This does play a lot into the fear that I spoke of last time we talked about this, where this is adding consistency to rulers again, which has traditionally bit the game in the butt. When rulers make the game too consistent, problems tend to arise. I struggle to think of how this is going to be more balanced than Scheherazade was. So like, you look at like Scheherazade's Grimoire cards, most of them, and you have like the Approaching the Truth is like a good card, Seed of Rebirth is now like a good card, and the other ones are like a little bit niche. But how could the Divinity deck be so much, you know, worse than those, that we're not going to see this problem of these rulers just starting with such an intrinsic card advantage? And then, of course, I'm not going to judge quite yet. I'm very excited, and I really hope it's well balanced, but this does play a lot into that fear that I had previously.
Yeah, so I think the other thing that they don't really talk about in this article that I think it's kind of important to recognize as we've seen it, excuse me one second, is that we know for a fact that runes are going to be kind of ruler and color restricted a little bit more. So like certain rulers are not going to be able to access certain runes.
Sure.
And there's going to be other kind of restrictions for it. And we also know that as a whole, rulers themselves have been kind of, I don't want to say like power spiked, but like kind of watered down. Like rulers themselves are not supposed to be, on the ruler side anyway, are not nearly as, are reported to not nearly be kind of as potent as what we have seen in the past. So they talk about in the first article that a ruler's new kind of concept moving forward is that it's like a commander giving orders to the rest of the army with like the divinities and playing cards, and then only if necessary will the ruler come down and join the fray. And so they're really kind of trying to tweak that a little bit, and I think that kind of speaks to maybe how divinity and runes are going to work. But again, I can agree with you that we got to be careful not to create too much consistency. Anthony, your thoughts?
Well, getting, back into the game, I'm excited to see this, because when I started, I started late, so I was already like halfway through a set, and then I got back into another halfway through a set. So I'm excited to start with like a brand new set to kind of get like, my feet wet and stuff, and I'm very interested to see how these runes work. So I'm totally excited for this.
Yeah, I think we were talking a little bit before we got started, I think there were some concerns when they announced how they were going to be doing kind of power balancing in this set, because they talked about how their plan is to power balance in between sets, right, by looking at competitive events. And it's like, how are they going to do that? And I think this divinity naturally, I think, sets them up to be able to have a leg up in that, where they go like, oh man, like the green rulers are like up far and away doing really well, right? Force of wind all the way, right? So in this next set, green has 3 runes that, there are 3 runes that green will have access to potentially. We're gonna make them divinity 8.
So I'm not sure I'm understanding
if a green deck, if a green deck really wants to be able to use this new support, they're going to have to really commit and kind of give up some of the other good cards that they're already using to make use of that.
Okay, but what you're talking about right now, like, nothing's changed about that. Like, they still have to print the sets you know, 6 or 7 months before we actually get our hands on them, right? So like, how are these runes changing?
Yeah.
Are they going to be like sealed abilities where they like release what they do and can just change it, or sort of like are the abilities not actually on the runes? Like I'm not sure I understand like how that's different than what they're doing right now.
So I agree. I think it is going to be tricky to see how it's implemented. I can't speak to necessarily how fast they're going to actually be implementing it. All I can see is I can see the avenue that they might take in trying to do that power balancing. That's all I can say. Like, whether or not it's going to be successful or that they can do it fast enough is kind of, you know, up in the air. The question becomes, does like a rune, like, are all of the runes going to have like cost X until a certain point, and then like right before release or something they'll say, okay, these runes cost this color, you know, this cost, and that becomes a problem because like then people opening new packs will get really confused, you know, by the divinity cost on stuff. Like I personally, and from a not having knowledge of how you know, card printing companies operate or speed of printing, I'm not sure how it gets implemented. All I can see is I can see divinity cost being the way they approach it. I mean, does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. I just don't think that'll be effective because, like, if you just like have a tier 1 deck and then you just don't print support for that deck, unless the support you're printing for other decks is super good, like, it's irrelevant what, like, if you print like, oh, this new green card is really good but it's going to cost 8, like, my immediate reaction is I'm just not going to even think about that card as playable because I'm not interested in investing that many resources when the cards they already have are so powerful. So like the only way that you can actually like balance the game by printing new cards is like having specific interactions with the existing tier 1 deck, or just like printing higher power level cards in the other colors and like actually having a power creep until rotation. So I mean, it's a dicey way to balance it, but that's like the only thing I can see based on what they've given us off of the runes.
Right, for sure. And they did say that in the article, so this will have happened before this comes up, so we can talk about it next week because we record this on Sunday nights, that this coming week, or this week, you know, before leading up to today, the 10 rulers will have been spoiled. So we'll have to see kind of what those look like, and we'll kind of talk about that next week, or maybe try to do a mini podcast or something to talk about what that's going to look like. But if you're already watching this and you've already checked out the 10 rulers, then, you know, kind of let us know your thoughts. But other than that, we'll talk about it next week, maybe how that's going to work. Any last thoughts about runes or divinity?
So can I like venture out a guess as to maybe what they're planning on doing with runes? This is a total shot in the dark, so like if this is completely wrong, then, you know, whatever. But so in Star Wars Destiny, you make a team of heroes basically that have a point value up to a certain point, and in that game they release a patch. Potentially with every set, that they call it balancing the force, you know, because they're cute. But basically, it changes the point value of some of their stronger things, like to up the point value a little bit. And so maybe that's what they're planning on doing, where like the divinity runes will balance things out, and then like with every set update, they'll say, all right, this is the new divinity cost on those spells. It's really inelegant.
Oh, interesting.
It's really inelegant because like when you open the card and it says the certain divinity number, then like new players aren't going to want to go online and be like, all right, here's what the divinity numbers actually are. But if it becomes like a cultural thing where like new players open it in a shop and then people are like, okay, yes, but the runes costs don't actually matter, like they change the runes constantly, that's how they balance the game, then maybe it starts to become okay. I don't know, but like that's the only thing in my head where they can just like fix things on the fly.
Right.
Yeah, that'd be pretty cool if they did something like that.
I agree.
I would love, like, as a like digital card game player as well, and also like video games, like I'm very accustomed to the life cycle of like balance patches, and it kind of sucks that like one of my favorite mediums of playing a game, which is like the physical card game, is so like unadaptable to that kind of thing, where like if you want to change something that's like a mistake in balance, the only thing to do is print new stuff. So I'm like very open to that, but I know not a lot of people are, so I think it'd be pretty cool what they would do. I didn't know that Star Wars did that, so that's really interesting.
So our other little kind of mini topic for today is this past weekend was ARG Atlantic City. Hopefully by this time you have watched Paul's kind of analysis of the top 8 lists and kind of heard a little bit about why why Atlantic City is not necessarily the cleanest indicator of what this meta is going to look like. All in all, what I really want to hear back, and this is more Ryan, as you were there and you chose to play Lumia.
Heck yeah.
There was a pretty stacked tournament, right? You talked about how there was a lot of really high-powered, high skill-level players, and they were pretty much all playing Sherry just because they needed to get their invites and stuff. But having played in this new format with these new cards and choosing not to play Sherry, can you talk a little bit about what your experience was like in the event, or like what decks you played against and what that was like for you? Anything new you saw?
Yeah, sure. So I have a tradition of going to events in New Jersey where I play against every single IU player in the tournament. So that would still happen. So my round 1 opponent was one of the 2 IU players. And it's an IU deck, and I had a sideboard, so I won. Round 2, I played against Time Spinning Witch. And that was a lot of fun, but because I put a lot of time on stream playing Time Spinning Witch, and I almost played Time Spinning Witch at the tournament, but I actually thought it was too good. I really wanted to play a meme deck, so I didn't want to play Time Spinning Witch because I thought I might actually have a chance. So I downgraded to this Lumia OTK. But I actually ended up liking the Lumia OTK a lot. But I played against Time Spinning Witch, and I knew exactly what I needed to Lorite. I knew exactly how to play around his Mosasaurus's turns and his Goddard turns and all that stuff, so I ended up winning that matchup as well. Round 3, I played against my first Scheherazade, and I lost game 1 because he was playing freaking 4 last audience, and I was just like, holy moly, that's a lot. And I'm just
my boy.
I'm trying to kill you with my rulers. I ended up gaining almost 10,000 life over the course of that game because he just kept throwing up dudes and I would attack and I wouldn't be able to kill him. He ended up finally battling my board, and then I ended up losing because I couldn't get the last little bit of damage in. But after I lost to Scheherazade, I played against a friend that I came with in round 4, and I scooped and gave him the win, so that was the end of my top 8. And then in round 5, I played against my other friend who was playing IU, and I just didn't want to play against IU again, so I just conceded to go do other stuff in Atlantic City. So that was my tournament experience.
Fair enough.
And I just didn't want to play Sherry because I knew I had a bunch of friends that were going to be there, and I knew I wanted them to get their Worlds invite, so I wasn't going to try hard.
Sure.
But most of the people that we did come with, that we did play test with, were playing Scheherazade or Fair. So those are the people that you saw on top 8, like Justin Klinger, Andre DeMorin, Brandon Rogers, Aaron Miles. Those are our playtesting group. So those are the decks that Aaron and I told them to play because these are the decks that we think we would be playing if we were trying hard. AJ ended up trying hard anyway. He's a bully, but
does he ever not try hard?
He didn't try hard at the last ARG in Connecticut. He was conceding to friends there. So I don't know.
That's fair.
But and then Deepwood all brought Scheherazade, and then the other New York group all brought Scheherazade. So these are the good players, and then they just all brought the same deck. There was 8 Scheherazade out of 25 players, so a third of the tournament. Yeah. And then 3 was the next highest, and it was 3 Lumia, 3 something else, only 2 Kirik, and it was just these are the players that I've never seen before. They play casually, and they're just not tournament ready or tournament level players, I guess I would say.
Sure.
It's just the strong players brought the strong deck, so they won. That's just kind of what the tournament is.
Yeah, fair enough. Overall, what's in having done some testing and kind of experimented with a bunch of really random stuff, outside of Sherry and Kirik and Fair, which we've talked about before, did you find anything that you particularly really enjoyed, or did better than you thought it did in this format, or what is your overall kind of opinions as this format shapes up about where it stands, and even potentially talking about we talked about last week, the different style of formats, right? Triangle, 2 deck, 1 deck, whatever. What do you think this meta might be shaping up to be?
It's hard to say. I think that Fair is really, really bad because Sherry's good. Fair just kind of loses out of board to some random stuff, but it also can just be super explosive and then just kill you. So Fair's kind of scary, but because Scheherazade's still good, I don't think it should be a deck in the format. So Sherry's good, Kirik's good. I think Gil is up there. I haven't put enough time with it, but it's a super hard to play deck, so I'm not even convinced that it will be popular, even if it is good. And then I think Lumia is still sleeper. I think my Lumia deck was kind of troll, but also I would probably change around 10 cards and continue to mess with it, and it would be a tier 1.5 deck, maybe even tier 1, because it does the same thing as the green-white Fair deck, but it's better, and it just has a better Sherry matchup. And there's also just Faye's command lists that I think are still good, but nobody ever builds Lumia. Only Japan and me ever build Lumia decks, so we have to wait for either me to figure out what I'm playing or Japan to have a GP for that to be a tier 1 deck.
Fair enough. So speaking a little bit about kind of this whole idea of looking at lists and trying to build lists and everything else, this whole concept of testing, like what does testing look like? And we've got a bunch of different kind of competitive levels here, right? We've got Ryan build the deck the night before Miles. We've got Brandan Bremont, myself, who I have
TCG grinder Brandan Bremont.
We've got wears gloves and plays goofy decks for his channel, but also sometimes likes to compete, Jeremy Franklin, and then Anthony. So I would be curious to see and talk about a little bit about what does your testing environment kind of start to finish a little bit look like. Brandon, we'll go ahead and start with you on this one.
So Ryan says that he always builds decks the night before, but don't be confused. I do as well. I have never shown up to a tournament like knowing, like with less than 4 decks in my bag. Like literally, I always just have an infinite number of things I want to play. So testing usually for me is, I'm actually lucky enough to have players that live pretty close to me that I feel comfortable testing with. So I have like Jalen Rojas and Andrew Vatlin that live in the Phoenix area with me. So we get together, we test at Denny's sometimes, we test at our local shop, and we were actually just doing this yesterday. We just sit down and we have piles and piles of cards and we just grind out matchups, and so that's a lot of fun. But a vast majority of my testing is on Lackey Online with my team, with people that whose opinions I respect. I think a lot of the problem with, like, if you want to improve your testing game a little bit, a lot of people like to focus more on the games and the results of those games. This is like results-oriented thinking, and I think that's a lot less important than like the mechanisms that bring games to their conclusions. And if that's a little like confusing, what I mean to say is that like when you're playing the game, you should be thinking about like, what cards could I have that would be improving this situation? What cards am I holding that aren't doing anything for me? What cards did I cast that put me at a negative tempo or a negative card advantage? And so you should be like adjusting the deck you're playing like on the fly. Never ever ever disallow takebacks in testing. That's like my biggest pet peeve ever. If I'm ever testing with someone that I don't normally test with, and like I make a play and I'm like, oh, actually I think this is better, I'm gonna back up, and then like they like try to stop me. That's like, I'm not testing with you anymore. That's just like ridiculous. So you should be focusing on what is this deck doing, how can it be doing it better, and what can we be changing on the fly. Like if I'm testing with someone and they want to just be like, I want to experiment with like what would happen if I like drew this right now. I'll just be like, all right, search your deck for it, play it, we'll see what happens. Like, because that's just like the kind of thing that you want to be looking for when you're testing.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm pretty similar when I'm actually doing competitive testing. I tend to play I tend to play open-handed when I'm doing testing with people that like I should say with the people that I like really am actually testing with, right? So I think there's like the true grind of like, let's sit down for 3 hours plus 4 hours, 5 hours, and just like really just rock this deck to its core and figure it out. And then there's also testing where I'm just like, I just need to practice piloting this, you know. So it's just kind of like less about what I'm playing against and more just like getting a feel for that kind of stuff. And I could say that they probably overlap, and they probably should overlap. But like when I'm in that really deep grind, I tend to play open-handed with my partner. And the main reason because it's like they might see something that I don't see. And again, it's not about winning or losing. Like at the end of a testing session, it's not like, oh man, I beat my partner 6 times. It's right. Okay, yeah, I feel like we've cut some cards that I didn't need to be playing anymore. We figured out more of what these sideboard cards should be. We figured out what these replacements should be. The deck feels more streamlined now. Like that's what I'm going for, rather than having like you know, like, oh man, I won.
Yeah, there's no winning in playtesting. There's no
exactly.
winning.
It's just like the deck feels better. I feel better piloting it. Okay, that was a good testing session. It's not about trying to beat my partner. It's not about making sure that I don't lose. And so I tend to do really well. I'm a visual learner for sure. Like visual and tactile is like kind of the way I learn things the most. So playing that open-handed and like looking at things and like having my partner like move cards around, or like, well, what if we played this here, then this could happen, and we can like point things out to each other on the board. That really helps me a lot.
Just as a side note,
and I'm the same way. Like I'll take backs, and it's like, well, what if I played this way? Okay, yeah, that didn't really work the way I wanted. So let's go ahead and rewind it a little bit and see what other options I could have taken. So yeah, I'm kind of the same way, Brandon.
just as a side note, I think that like when you're playtesting, if you have like as much resources as I have, you should have 3 people doing it, 2 people playing, and then 1 person that's looking at both players' hands, so they get like sort of an eagle view of it. Like that third person often has some pretty important input that like the 2 people that are actually playing can't always see, which I think is a often underlooked aspect of testing.
I would agree.
Ryan?
Anthony, any additions
I'll
to
go
that?
last. I just rambled about Atlantic City for like 10 minutes, so Anthony, go ahead.
So I feel like compared to you guys, I'm like such a noob, because when I make a deck, I don't have the skill to make it the day of or the night of like you guys can. But when it comes to for me making a deck, I really like to like sit down and really think about, you know, what do I want my ruler to be, and then how can I expand from there. So like for me, as soon as the new Rhea came out, I was like, I'm going Rhea. And then I knew I wanted to play a Rhea discard, because, you know, it's just, that's what she is. And so I would search, you know, for all the cards that involve discarding and stuff, and that would kind of go along with the same color. And then I'll kind of just throw it together, and like you guys, I'll test with some friends, and we, like Jeremy, we do like open hand, so it's like, okay, I don't really like that, let me go back, and we have, you know, somebody usually there so they can go back, okay, so you had these cards, let's switch them for these cards in the deck, and let's go from there. And then as I play test, I'm like, you know what, I really wish I would have had a card that could stop that or something like that. And so I will continue to play, and then I would just jot those ideas down, and then I'll go back and be like, okay, I needed to negate that addition, I need to negate that effect, what cards could help me do that. And so every time I play, I'm constantly like, okay, I need a card to do this against this kind of a deck. And so I'll just go back and I'll keep practicing over and over until I feel like my deck is good enough. But I'm not real competitive, because we don't have anything out here and, you know, stuff like that, so we just play for fun. But I do, you know, take my time with my decks, and sometimes it could take me like a week to come up with one. But I really like to look at all the decks that are being played. What are some of their main focus? Like, are they going to discard? Are they going to swarm? And then I kind of like to think, how can I make my deck balanced against kind of all that? And then just go from there with play testing and be like, okay, that worked. But like Jeremy said, if I do win multiple times, I'm like, okay, you know what? I watched a video where a Keurig deck was swarmed like this on the field. Let's go ahead and set that up, and let's see if I can, you know, take it down, or at least knock out most of them. And so we'll just watch some games, and we're like, alright, I like that. Let's set your deck up like that, and then I'm in this position. Can I get rid of this? If not, what cards could be helpful for me in that situation?
I mean, I think there's actually a lot of value to talk about, like, casual playtesting, kind of like you're saying, like, just the process of, you're not, like, your end goal is not winning a tournament, your end goal is this really fun thing that your deck is trying to do. And then, like, when you're building that deck, you don't just want it to, like, be complete crap, you know, because you still want to, like, beat other people. But, like, one of the things that you were just saying is, like, you think about, like, what cards you're losing to, and you're, like, writing those down. Just, like, taking whatever, like, your core concept is, and then just being like, okay, what are, like, with the weaknesses here, and, like, what cards can I put in to, like, shore up those weaknesses so that I can still make sure that my deck is doing what it wants to do. At the competitive level, it's just, like, you're only looking at, like, the most optimal things, but even, like, any level, it's just, like, exactly what good playtesting is. So I think even though you're saying you're not as competitive, like, you're still doing the same thing as us.
Oh, yeah. And so what started out as, like, a black-white discard Rhea is now my black, white, and green Rhea / control. So I was watching Jeremy's deck, or Jeremy's match against Sigma, and I never thought about using Rachel, because when she comes into play, I can discard 3 cards from the top of their decks. I'm like, huh, I didn't think about that. So maybe I can add her to help me discard. But then that means I need win. So are there any good win negate cards? Oh, Lorite, that works. So it's just like it just keeps growing from there. And then I'm like, okay, so I think I have a deck. I think we can go from there. And I just like to play test just for fun. I mean, it's just so much fun for me. I really play this game just for the fun and just to have fun with friends.
And there's nothing at all wrong with that.
Heck no.
If this game wasn't fun, I definitely wouldn't spend 12, 15 hours plus a week making YouTube content for it.
And you know what? I have fun losing sometimes. Like, I'm not sure if you guys watched it, but Jeremy posted a recent video where he freaking turned to Umer me, and I was just like,
Keurig all in, let's go.
I was like, he's like, oh, I got this. I was like, what are you talking about? He's like, oh, watch, here comes this turn to Umer. I'm like, ah, fine, you know, just go ahead. I can't stop it, but just go ahead. And I just enjoyed it.
Here's 11,000 damage.
Oh yeah.
Enjoy.
Can I mirror force you?
I was telling you guys before we started the podcast about my Epic Stories deck and how I just take infinite turns, like, at some point in the game, and, like, the first couple of times I did it, my opponent's like, alright, you can do it, and I'm like, yes, and I'm just, like, flickering Umer, searching my deck, playing through cards, killing my Alice's World, flickering my Frig, getting back 3 cards, like, discard, looking at their hand with Blazer, making sure they don't have anything to stop it, and just, like, literally just sitting there for 5 minutes just doing my own stuff while they didn't do anything, and that's just, that's what's fun for me.
What could be more fun?
But,
so Ryan, do you have any, your thoughts on testing? What does testing look like for you?
Yeah, so I'm kind of in the same school of thought as Bremon. I don't have the luxury of having anyone that lives within an hour of me, unfortunately, so I do like to playtest online if possible. I really hate not having cards in my hand because games just feel like they go slower when you can't just like perform an action like by putting your hand on the table and you like click on 5 different things. But it's a lot less about being results oriented than it is about understanding the concepts and like the abstract things that are happening during a game that lead to advantageous situations and ultimately victory. And I've tried to talk about this in like some way and just like put my thoughts into like my daily mileage videos, and I have no idea how to like talk about it effectively because it's just so like a weird thing to think about. But like as you play through a game, you're just like, and you're looking at your hand, you're thinking about what your opponent can have, you're just like trying to think about like what cards could exist that you could be playing that could just like swing the game in your favor without them being able to come back, or like what cards you could do that would give them a chance to come back, and then like what could you do to counter get, like how do you get tempo and then build on tempo and then not like lose it kind of thing, right? And one of the most problematic cards that like prevents that from existing right now is Final Battle, and that's like one of the reasons Scheherazade is actually like probably still the best deck, is because it can play Final Battle and it's it's like the safest deck to do so, and that's kind of dumb. But just like you're just not looking at who's winning and who's losing. You're looking at like I can playtest like I was playing this like super garbage like Scarlet, Blue, Green, Red like Dinosaur, Welser, Shayla's Adventure deck, and I played it twice. And I won both games, and I was like, alright, this deck is actually unplayable. Because even though I won, it was like I was drawing like very specific one-ups at like very specific situations that were just enabling me to get card advantage and like dig myself out of a hole. And I knew that if I wasn't like getting these exact specific interactions, or if my opponent had like a response to some of this stuff, like I knew that I would just lose. So I'm like, okay, like I'm winning, like the games are ending in my favor, and it's like a convincing fashion because like I've done my thing that my deck is trying to do. I'm like playing multiple Nososaurus and having a great time, but like I know realistically that I shouldn't be getting to this point based on just like how the game has gone, so I have to throw this idea out the window. And it's really just like looking at like is this something that's going to happen every game? And you can like grind a lot of games just to figure that out, and like I'm sure if I played more of this Blue, Green, Red, Scarlet deck, I would find out that it's just not worth it because the things that were happening don't happen consistently enough. But like if you can just read the game as you're playing it well enough, you don't need to actually grind that many games to figure it out.
Yeah,
or
for sure.
On the flip side, to figure out if a deck is good.
Yeah, for sure. I think Frank talked about this before. It's like you can't just see your deck. It'd be like, oh man, it's beating these other decks and da 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 da, so it must be good, right? Well, doesn't necessarily mean that, right? It's about what are you testing against, and like what is actually causing you to win. Are you like, is it this card that you're playing as a 4 of that you can consistently get to, or is it this thing where it's like, man, you just happen to really be getting this card that you play as a 2 of really consistent. You know, you happen to have drawn it both those times. You know, these 4 or 5 times we played this game, and it won you the game. But really, like, can you depend on that for an 8-round day? Like, can you depend on it? I think it's about at some point you have to be able to extrapolate kind of your chances and odds of certain things happening to a whole day's worth of tournament. Mm-hmm. And I think that's sometimes where testing kind of becomes lax for some people, is like they play and it feels good to them, but then they don't really take into consideration, like, okay, but is this deck going to do what you want to do for the entire day? This idea of can a deck have enough gas to make it through a full day? Like, do you have enough gas to make it through a full day? Can a deck perform for an extended period of time? And I think that there have definitely been some times in the past where I have seen decks and talked to players who, like, I've beaten them, and then they get really confused because, like, man, it did so well in testing, and then I'm like, yeah, but we're in round 6, and you're sitting at, like, pretty high, you know, we're in, like, round 5, round 6, pretty high table. Like, eventually, like, decks that aren't super consistent are going to peter out. Like, you just can't depend on them for that full day, and maybe you didn't think about that. So I definitely think you have to also be able to extrapolate to what does this look like at a 200-man event, you know?
Absolutely.
What do I look like when I'm playing a 200-man event? How's my brain waves? Because I can speak to Collinsville last year, where Ogre was playing, pretty much all of Ogre was playing this, like, Val 3 sideboard into Val 2 list, which, quite honestly, was super fun, and I really enjoyed it, and I don't regret making that decision. But that's a clear case of, like, I myself didn't really think about how playing that deck for that long was going to affect me mentally, and I just couldn't keep it up. So that was something I just think that people just have to consider, is you have to be mindful of yourself too, because I remember sitting across from Victor Harris he was playing Turbo Feetsing, and there came a point in the match where I literally just got dizzy and I just couldn't think straight, and I made like 4 misplays in a row, and that matchup was like 75% my favor because of Val 3 just like getting free pings on stuff, and I was like, yep, I think I'm done.
I think that's why a lot of people do gravitate towards aggro, if they're not really super comfortable with, like, the tournament scene. Like, it's just, like, it's cool to say I have this really fun control deck that I might know how to play, but playing a control deck for 8 rounds is a very taxing experience. And just, like, playing a red deck, like, yeah, it seems simple, but, like, playing a red deck for 7 rounds is still pretty difficult, because by the end of the day, like, you still have, like, aggro decks are pretty straightforward, but there still are some decisions you have to make, and they're very important decisions. And after 7 rounds of doing that, you're just like, man, is this, like, it takes a toll on the brain if you're not used to it, you know what I mean?
Oh, for sure.
For sure, says the super no-win condition control player.
No, man, I could play fatigue control all day, but I can't, like, put that on everyone else.
I don't know.
Say, like, oh, go ahead.
I said I don't know if I could do that, because I mean I've never gone to like a real tournament, so I feel like if I went, I would just be like so drained, and I'm like, hold on, give me time. I'm trying to remember. I can't. Do I do this or do I do this?
I think my entire Force of Will career was actually launched off the back of a red deck, in the sense that I managed to play Necrolance to win my first Grand Prix, and once you win a Grand Prix, like, it's just like a huge weight off your shoulders, it's like a huge confidence boost, and then you can kind of ride that high like the next couple Grand Prix, and that helped me consistently do well. So then, like, I was riding the high off of that win on the back of a red deck to, like, top my next GP, and once I topped another GP, I'm like, oh, I might be good at this game, and then I topped another GP, and I'm like, alright, I'm a legend forever. This is all, everything's easy now. And that's just, I was just riding it was all because of the red deck.
And then your brother rode that high, and then he won Worlds.
Yeah, he's still high, as far as I can tell. The man has an ego the size of a blimp.
Ooh.
Huh. Well, we'll see how that plays out for him at this year's Worlds, based on what the format.
Oh, I'm gonna win this year's World. Did I not tell you? I'm guaranteed.
Oh, are you sure?
Guaranteed?
I have to.
I think I'm gonna win this year's Worlds, and I'm not even playing. It's gonna be a good time. First place, DMO 7-3. Wait, what?
I have to be the best player in my family. It's got.
I went undefeated. It's fine.
And so, do we all want to take like a little wager to see who's going to do better, Ryan or Aaron, just for fun?
I'm not a betting man.
No, I mean not like bet. I mean, let's just all take like a poll, like see who thinks Ryan's gonna win, who thinks Aaron's gonna win.
I feel like I'm like friends with both of them, and I don't want to like irritate either. So like I don't really want
to
like call that.
I can't really
do
call
it secretly.
Secretly on this podcast.
I don't gamble with fixed odds, you know. I don't gamble when the deck's stacked. I already know I'm gonna do better because I'm gonna win. I just said that, so I don't understand.
There you go.
You know, there's no betting really. America versus Europe, though, that'd be interesting.
Oh, not even
to
close.
Talk about.
America's gonna slaughter them this year.
Oh my God, it's not gonna be close.
Yeah, it's gonna be. That's kind of the heated conversation every year is who's gonna win it. So we got to try to take it back this year. So we have when this comes out. When we're recording it, we have a week before. But when this comes out, people might even be traveling currently to Collinsville. Let's see kind of what people are expecting. I know, Ryan, you're not sure if you can make it. Brandon, I know you said you can't make it.
Sadly.
I will be going to do commentary. I think Frank is head judge, right?
He is.
So like it's pretty interesting to see that our Teachers Lounge posse is actually not going to be participating really in Collinsville. So with that in mind, having been kind of separate from what is going to happen, what are your expectations for kind of what we're going to see? Whether that be, breakdown of rulers, maybe some pro players, or people you kind of expect to see there, what things you expect to be what the ruler breakdown might look like, stuff like that.
So the only certainty is that Alex is going to get DQ'd at some point. So we have that to look forward to.
Yep.
Collinsville tradition.
It is a Collinsville tradition.
Beyond that, I think that this ARG is going to shape a lot of the format, so I think we're going to see a bunch of Scheherazads show up. I think we're going to see a bunch of people gunning to beat Scheherazade, but just like the last format, there's not like a super clean answer to it. Like there's a few, but they're not like hard silver bullets, so I think that those people are going to once again drift back to Scheherazade, so I imagine we're going to see a lot of that in the top. There's still a few other decks that are like on the table though. I feel like anyone that tries that Fair deck that got put 2 places in Collinsville is gonna have a real bad time. Like I don't think that deck is actually like that good, especially in that I don't think it beats Scheherazade. So I think that might factor into it a little bit. We might see Gil. I think Gil's really good. We might see this Lumia deck that Ryan posted because a lot of people like to ride whatever Ryan's doing. So I think we'll see that.
I want to see one person playing Keurig all-in combo. I don't even care if they do well. I just want to see him play it.
There's too many Lorites running around. Can't play that deck.
Yeah, you can't really play that deck if Lorite exists.
So I actually think that we might see. I think that we will see less Lorite because the best deck is going to be perceived to be either Scheherazade or Keurig. So my expectation is that Keurig is going to be played in high numbers because it's a red deck. Scheherazade is going to be played in high numbers because people are going to correctly assume that it's a good deck, but incorrectly because of how well it did at the ARG. So I think people are just going to net deck Scheherazade and play it for that reason. And then in testing, people are going to mash those up against each other, realize that Lorite is good, but not super impactful. I think 2 Lorite is going to be the standard. Maybe some people play 3, and you'll see them more at the board. And if any deck is going to benefit from that, it's going to be the handful of players that have been testing Time Spinning Witch since the deck came out, and just other people aren't going to know how to play against it. Once you've put some games into it, it's easier to beat, but it's still a strong deck. But if you don't know what it does, you will get hosed by it, and especially if you're not playing at least 3 Lorite, in my opinion. So Time Spinning Witch, if anything's going to sneak in the top 8 that we're not expecting, my bet would be Time Spinning Witch. And then Scheherazade, Keurig. I agree with Brandon that Fair is bad overall because Scheherazade dumpsters it, and even Keurig can give it a run for its money. Gil is good, but I think it's going to be too hard to play, and I think a lot of the people who are known players in Force of Will are just going to be playing the Scheherazade deck because it's the deck that was good last format. They're already super solid on it. They're going to be very comfortable playing mirror matches, so I think that's where a lot of the known top players are going to gravitate towards Scheherazade. So Gil is only going to be played by maybe a handful of perhaps inexperienced players, so it won't perform well. And then maybe I can convince someone to play Lumia. I hope that I can, and I think that if we get some good players on it, that it would actually break into the top 8. But overall, I'm expecting Scheherazade, Keurig only, with maybe Time Spinning Witch in top.
So I think that going off the same kind of idea of if Lorite doesn't get played as much, then that opens up the door for a couple of things. I honestly think that if you're correct in assuming that Lorite isn't going to see a lot of play, I think that Fox can make it happen. Fox, even in last format, showed that it did have some potential. Alter Fox, its main kind of concern was just dealing with Lorites, having to kind of play this really tricksy Lorite game. And so combining the fact that Sherry doesn't have kind of the more early game heavy damage dealers that it used to have, which kind of gives Fox a little bit more time to set up, and the potential idea that there's not as many Lorites going around, I think that Alter Fox could actually see a comeback and potentially sneak in there as well, beside maybe Time Spinning Witch. So that's kind of, I would agree with you about Sherry and Keurig being very popular, but I would add into Time Spinning Witch that I think Fox could potentially also be that deck that kind of sneaks in.
I almost agree. My problem with Fox is I really don't think it has a super good Keurig matchup, especially if you don't find Killing Stones early, because if you don't see Killing Stones, you can't gain life, and Keurig is just going to deal 40 to you like by turn 4. And then the problem with the Scheherazade matchup is that like they're all playing Ray and like the Ray 0. So not only is that a 2-mana 8/9 essentially, so like they kind of still do have their big beater. It's also a flyer, but it means you can't Amit to gain life, so you can't consistently drop final battles on them. And Scheherazade just like draws a lot of cards, and if you can't final battle them, they just turn their board sideways and actually do kill you.
I think our problems with Foxes are many. Like, so they like need to hit Killing Stone still. They're now spread over 3 colors. Like, they don't have. There's just a lot going against that deck. Like Lorite, it was like a nail in the coffin. But even if Lorite doesn't get played, like, I don't necessarily.
Oh yeah, I definitely don't think that I'm like. That's why I said like I think it might be able to sneak in, but I'm not like, oh yeah, guys, you totally gotta watch out for Fox. It's just kind of like, I could see it happening, but I'm not like a betting man to say like 100% there's gonna be a Fox in top 8.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
I just don't think it's like super strong. Like it has serious problems. Another thing is like Cleaning Doll's like good again because there are like the Fair deck plays Lifestealing Altar. The Lumia decks are trying to play Ataraxia. So like Cleaning Doll is being played as like a 1, even sometimes a 2 of in the main board, and then they side into at least 3 to 4. So like it makes it kind of hard to actually get your altars off and just do cool Fox things. So like the fact that it has a like actually bad matchup against the top 2 decks, even without Lorite, just makes it like it's kind of rough.
Fair enough. Anthony, what do you think?
Well, I know they wouldn't do well, but me personally, I like fun decks. So I would love. I know they're not going to top, but I would love to see a Rhea and a Power Ranger deck there, just for the fun of it.
What was the second one?
I mean, because
Power Ranger, Glorious.
Oh.
Power Ranger and Rhea.
What?
Oh yeah,
because
Glorious. He's talking about Glorious.
Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, it's just fun, but I mean, when I started, and I didn't realize it until my friend pointed it out, but I've always enjoyed playing vampire decks. So it started with Dracula, then Vlad, then I played Mikage for a bit, and then I got into Rhea. And so it's like I would like to see a Rhea deck. I would like to see some fun decks. You know, we're not obviously not going to get very far into it, but let's just have some fun decks in there. Just you know, obviously, you know, like you guys say, you know, Keurig and Sherry, they're always, you know, they're going to probably be like top. So let's just have some fun decks there, just for, you know, fun purposes.
Yeah, I definitely want to see a good spread of other stuff. Like I'm looking at the recent event from Italy, the Rome GP, and that was cluster, right? But it was still, it had a lot of ruler diversity, and so I would like to see Collinsville have something similar to that in terms of just seeing diversity in the game. But how much of the top is consistent of just 2 or 3 rulers? I mean, that's probably going to be pretty standard.
Oh yeah, it's going to probably be Keurig and Sherry.
No, yeah, I think that sounds right. I really like Ray too. Let me just say, like, I love making my opponent discard all of their cards, and I think that it's a sad, sad day that like the best deck is green-black, and they're not just jamming in 4 Glint of Insight. That breaks my heart. And like, I really feel like Ray could actually do something if she had any way in her colors to interact with J rulers, but otherwise she just get clapped by like Fair. It's unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is sad.
It's like the only thing she needs to do, and she's probably viable.
You just need to reprint Black Moonbeam, is what you're saying.
That is
there you
exactly
go.
what I'm saying. Just
but just for Rhea.
Yeah, just like
just
remove a mystery
like
count of Black Moonbeam.
Yeah, just like 2 black, kill target J ruler, remove a mystery counter, unchaseable. Just oh my goodness, that gives
there you go.
My beating heart.
See now
Jeff, you listening?
Now Ryan just gave me an idea. Now obviously there's not a card that can do that, but now I wanna see if there is something I could do to possibly go do that along those lines. Obviously I won't find a way, but I'll. He just gave me an idea.
You find one, you let me know, man.
Man,
I
we're
really
banking
want to
on
play
you.
Rhea.
But I mean, if Ryan goes, then obviously Lumia's going to be up in there too. So I mean.
Oh yeah,
So Lumia and everything else is sharing Keurig.
Fair enough. So I had an idea for a fun topic. I'm actually going to kind of change it a little bit because I think that a question was asked in the Ruler School Discord that I think is actually pretty good. So we're coming into this new... We were originally going to talk about like designing a rune, but I think we need to see what a rune looks like first to be able to kind of have a starting point. But we're coming up into a meta where we're about to lose all of the dual stones, right? Where literally any form of dual stone that has existed is about to be vanished. So we're losing countdown stones, we're losing shock rocks, we're losing the pure dual stones, all of that stuff. So going into this next, like in Valhalla, right? If they were to print some kind of dual color stones, outside, I guess you could choose to pick just the original dual stones getting reprinted. But as our fun topic, if you had to kind of pick a type of stone or a way to make a dual color-ish stone in Valhalla cluster, how would you do it? And that'll be kind of it. Like how would you do it, and maybe how quickly would you introduce it? So I kind of will start off. I would want to see the countdown stones come back, but I would want them in every possible color combination. Which means that, like, not only do we have a green stone that countdowns for 2 black, but we also have a black stone that counts down for 2 green. Like, I just want to see the other ones that were missing, because there were just some countdown stones that existed that I just were like, man, I really wish this countdown stone was white and then could produce black for a couple of countdowns instead of the other way around. The reason why is because I think that still provides a little bit of splashability, but you can't like depend on your stones being perfect all the time like we have with dual stones. So that would be what I would do if I could produce. I would just bring back the countdown stones, but make them every color combination.
All right, can I go next?
Yeah, Brandon, go ahead.
I thought about this like to infinity and beyond. I think it would be really cool to have a cycle of 5 stones that all tap for the basic color, and then all also said tap, put a charge counter on this stone if it does not have a charge counter, and then an ability that says tap, remove a charge counter, produce a will of any color. So a cycle of 5 stones that could all take off a turn to charge themselves, and then could tap for any color afterward. So it would be
like a basic red. So like a basic red that takes a turn off and can produce for any of the other 4 colors.
Right, so basically it makes your mana very, very good if you are slower, and very not as good if you're more aggressive. So what this does is it encourages the game to slow down a little bit unless you're aggressive, in which case you'd want to be a monocolor, which is how I feel like so in a lot of other games that's how it's kind of done, because you can trade consistency for speed. And I think this replicates that process a lot while allowing the control decks to be greedier in a lot more colors, which is what they already wanted to be. And then it doesn't punish the aggressive decks as much, because like if you go into a bunch of colors, you have to take turns off in order to charge for those colors, so the aggressive decks still get a window to come in. And but it allows you to play these much greedier, much more fun late game control decks.
Sure, I like that idea. So charge.
Control.
So charge stones. We got countdown stones. We got charge stones. Ryan, what would you got?
So let me start this by saying, like, I just think that dual stones, like just the dual stones as we have them, are super, super important for Force the Will, and like what makes people like Force the Will over other games like Magic, because you get to play your like consistent 2 to 3 color decks. Like 3 color decks have some inconsistency issues, as they should. 2 color decks, like without the countdown stones, like if 2 color decks only had dual stones, like you could only play dual stones and like 6 basics, they would be a little bit inconsistent, but like it would still be pretty easy to play that deck, and I think that's completely how that should be. And I think that just like dual stones are something that Force of Will, like by design, like needs. But if we are losing them, we're not going to have any of them whatsoever. I think it would be an interesting idea to have basic color stones for each color that say when this card enters the battlefield, you may search your deck for any basic stone and put it on top of your library. So if you're playing like, so you don't have stones that tap for 2 colors, but like when you get your blue stone on turn 1, you get to make sure that you have a green stone on turn 2 for your blue-green deck. So even though you're not guaranteed to hit both colors turn 1, you are guaranteed both colors by turn 2, and you can even play 3, 4 color decks, like depending, but like you just don't have all colors at all times because they are like still only basic stones, but you get to like fix as you go what stones you're calling. And then you also just have to play basic stones in your deck. Which would like
search stones.
The consistency a little bit, yeah. But like you get to, like if you were playing like for example, like a red-blue deck, then like you play 4 red stones that have this ability, 4 blue stones that have this ability, and then 1 basic red, 1 basic blue, right? I think that would be like interesting. I'm not sure. I have absolutely no testing with this. If it would just be garbage and like horrible, but that's how I would envision a cool dual stone system working.
Sure. So search stones.
Yeah, that was like my Force of Will equivalent of fetch lands as best as I could think.
Yeah, fair enough. And Anthony, what about you? What do you think?
I actually like Ryan's idea, but me, I
keeping that crown next week, boys.
Yeah, but me, I came out of Yu-Gi-Oh, and so you can't have anything free without like a major cost. So for stones, I think it would be cool if we can have a stone that could produce all colors, but you will have to either pay life points or maybe discard a card of a certain color, and then that stone can produce that color.
Oh, so like either bring back Moonshade or make it so you have to like pitch a card to get the color you want.
Yeah, so maybe like you call a stone and it obviously whatever it is, it's like that. It's basic. Maybe if it's like a red, but all stones have the ability to where if you discard a card from your hand, this stone can produce that color, or maybe discard a card from your deck and the stone can produce that color. Ooh, I think if there's like
planting beans.
Yeah.
Trade in stones.
You mean discard the top card of your deck, right? You don't mean like search for a card.
No, just discard the top card or a card in your hand.
Oh yeah.
That makes sense. Yeah.
So trade in stones. Okay.
Cool. Or life.
Yeah, that's a cool idea.
Or like life.
Yeah. Well, we had a stone that produced all colors that paid life. There was the Moonlight Stone in Grim Cluster. So it could be cool to see that. Could be cool to see that stone come back, but I do like this the concept of a trade-in stone. So it's pretty cool. So that is our 4 kind of for this week to see who gets the crown, right? So if you could design if you could design a 2-color-ish stone to go into Valhalla Cluster with the loss of dual stones, what would you do? Jeremy Franklin, picked bringing back the countdown stones, but making every color combination. Brandon, you created charge stones, which
a cycle of 5 that each tap for the will of their own color. Then I'll say tap at a charge counter if this card does not have a charge counter, and tap remove a charge counter, produce 1 will of any attribute.
Ryan, you produced search stones, which do.
They're just single color stones that when they enter the battlefield or when you call them, you get to search your deck for any basic stone and put it on top of your stone deck.
And then Anthony, you picked trade-in stones, what you created, which do what?
You either discard a card from your hand to produce that color, or you discard the top card of your deck to produce the color of the card.
Yeah, so there you go. So those are your 4 options. Go ahead and go to the Ruler School Facebook page to vote in this week's poll and see if we can steal Ryan's crown from him. Anthony will have to let you know if you are the winner, because unfortunately he won't be joining us next week. But I am excited to see kind of next week when we're potentially going to be taking a week off due to Collinsville, but if we hear you guys next week, awesome. Otherwise, we'll see you guys in a couple of weeks and see what comes out of that. But as always, we are super grateful for you to be joining us for the Teachers Lounge, and as always, this is DMO73, and I am joined by Ryan Miles,
your boy,
Brandan Bremont,
peace out,
and this week's patron guest Anthony Lewis.
Vote for me. I want Ryan to lose.
No.
And we'll see you guys next week.